And we are live.
The chair notes the time is 6 o'clock. I call this meeting of the Amherst Zoning Board of Appeals to order. My name is Steve Judge. As ZBA chair, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting. We will begin with a roll call of the ZBA members. Steve Judge is present. Mr. Craig Meadows.
Present.
Mr. Everald Henry.
Present.
Mr. Philip White.
Present.
Mr. David Slobiter.
Present.
The quorum is present. Also attending the public hearing tonight is Jacinta Williams, a planner for the town. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to observe the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a quasi-judicial body that operates under the authority of Chapter 40A of the General Laws of the Commonwealth for the purpose of promoting the health, safety, convenience, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the town of Amherst. In accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws Chapter 40A and Article 10 Special Permit Granting Authority of the Amherst Zoning Bylaw, this public meeting has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and mailed to parties of interest. All hearings and meetings are open to the public and are recorded by town staff and may be viewed via the Town of Amherst YouTube channel and the ZBA webpage. The procedure is as follows. The petitioner presents the application to the board during the hearing, after which the board will ask questions for clarification or additional information. After the board has completed its questions, the board will seek public input. The public speaks with the permission of the chair. If a member of the public wishes to speak, they should so indicate by using the raise hand function on their screen or by pressing *9 on their phone. The chair, with the assistance of the staff, will call upon people wishing to speak. When you are recognized, provide your name and address to the board for the record. All questions and comments must be addressed to the board. The board will normally hold public hearings where information about the project and input from the public is gathered, followed by public meetings for each. The public meeting portion is when the board deliberates and is generally not an opportunity for public comment. If the board feels it has enough information and time, it will decide upon the applications tonight. Each petition is heard by the board is distinct and evaluated on its own merits, and the board is not ruled by precedent. Statutorily, for a special permit, the board has 90 days from the close of hearing to file a decision. For a variance, the board has 100 days from the date of filing for the variance to file its decisions. No decision is final until a written decision is signed by the sitting board members and is filed in the town clerk's office. Once the decision is filed with the town clerk, there's a 20-day appeal period for an aggrieved party to contest the decision with the relevant judicial body in Superior Court. After the appeal period, the permit must be recorded at the Registry of Deeds to take effect. Tonight's agenda: consideration of the approval of the minutes of October 17th, 2024, a public meeting on ZBA FY 2025-07, Mission Cantina, 485 West Street, in accordance with condition number 6 of the FY 2015-30 special permit. Changes to the approved plans or permitted operations shall be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals at a public meeting for the board to determine whether the changes are minor or significant enough to require modification of the special permit. Any new seating or other capacity shall require modification of the special permit. A review of the proposed changes to determine significance will take place for property located at 485 West Street, map 19D, parcel 19, BVC, Village Center Business Zoning Districts. A public hearing on ZBA FY 2025-10, 19 Research Drive, request to modify FY 2024-01, special permit to increase the caretaker apartment from 14 to 30% of residential area for property located at 19 Research Drive, map 19D, parcel 19. I think we have a mistake here on the we have a mistake on the locations for the two properties, Jacinta, so we can correct that on the both are we have a public hearing for Research Drive, address for Research Drive and for Mission Cantina at the same.
I see what you're saying.
Yep,
I
we
see
have to have
that.
that fixed. Anyway,
Yes.
following that is a ZBA FY 2025-09, 6365 Salem Street. Applicant seeks to come into compliance with ZBA 7 sections 7001 and 70002 for an enforcement letter that was received regarding the parking for the property located at 6365 Salem Street, map 15A, parcel 77, RG, General Residence Zoning Districts, and ZBA FY 2025-12, 422 Amity Street. The applicant has requested to withdraw without precedent. General public comment period on any matter not before the board and any other business not anticipated within the past 48 hours is next order of business, and then adjournment. So the first order of business tonight is consideration of the minutes from the October 17th meeting. I reviewed those and I have no suggested changes. Do other people have suggested changes to the minutes from October 17th? All right.
Mr. Chair.
If there's no changes, there is a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from October 17th, 2024. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, the vote occurs on the motion to approve the minutes. The chair votes aye. Mr. Meadows,
Aye.
Mr. Sloviter,
Aye.
Mr. Henry,
Aye.
and Mr. White.
Aye.
The motion carries. The minutes are approved. The next order of business is, I don't think I have the right address or the right map placement, but it's
I can give
ZBA
that to you.
Okay,
It's 21B parcel 82.
great. ZBA FY 2025-07, Mission Cantina, 485 West Street. So we have received from them several drawings from the working plans. We've received exterior renderings, internal renderings, internal designs for seating, and we've received a letter mentioning what the goal of the application or what the goal of the request is, as well as a approved plan from dated 6/7/2012. It's a floor plan for the Mission Cantina, which was approved in 2012. So it's ZBA FY 2011-00016. I understand that the goal of this, sir, is to return it to the to what was approved in the earlier special permit, and that the current conditions vary from what was approved in the current in the special permit itself. If that's true, please confirm and give us a little bit about what your purpose is in asking for this change, or referral back to the original drawing. Just
Thank
name and
you.
address for the record too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm attorney Rich Maynard. I am the individual who presented the materials to the board for your consideration. I believe that probably you have in attendance in the audience tonight would be Walter Pacheco and Bill Katsilas, who are the current owners of Mission Cantina. And also probably in attendance is Manny Sousa, who is the designer who prepared the documents that you have before the board. And also Nick Southwick, who's the contractor who would do any of the proposed work that's there. The purpose for us coming before you tonight is, as you may know, the restaurant was recently sold to Mr. Pacheco and Mr. Katsilas. As part of their sort of welcoming to that area, they're looking to basically do a little maintenance and updating on the property there that's been a little bit, probably due. So in moving forward with trying to get the permits in place for those updates. They met with, of course, the building department and the planner to make sure they were in conformance with what was necessary to make any of the repairs that they were hoping to complete. So as part of that process, we reviewed the permit that was initially put in place in 2011, 2012, which was the plan that you referred to a moment ago that we're trying to return to. If you were able to review that plan and compare that to the sheet that we provided, which was the EX 1.1, the current existing floor plan, you can see that there is some interior walls noted by what is called the beer cooler and a pass-through window that were not part of the 2012 permit or the updated 2019 permit. So the applicants are looking to take down those walls to make the property back compliant with what we consider to be the current approved plans. While they're doing that, they're also cleaning up some of the post outside that had some rot on it in the eaves and the outside area, and replacing some windows and doors, which was why we submitted the rendering of the exterior as well. So there would be some approximation or presentation of what the, not really a change, but what the updated area would be. So those are the materials that were presented. We believe that what they're talking about doing is really more on the lines of maintenance than any sort of change, and therefore we thought that it was minor, not requiring the issuance of a modification or new special permit. I should note, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that there was in the initial plans that were filed, there was a small change on the seating capacity for the facility, which changed the seating from 49 to 52. When we became aware of that, as part that presently is in place for the existing special permits, that requires a modification of the special permit for any changing the seating capacity. We went back and revised the plans and have removed 3 of the locations for the seating, 1 bar stool and 1 2-person seating, and submitted just this evening. I hope that I did forward to Jacinta. I'm not sure if she got those plans, but we redrew the plans and have submitted them, remaining consistent with the approved 49 seating capacity that is there currently. And that's essentially what we're trying to do.
Great. So what you're saying is that the previous owner wasn't in full compliance with the drawings and the plans that were approved in the special permit, in the 2011 special permit, and you're returning to that state of compliance with it. Your goal is to return to the state of compliance with the 2011 special permit, correct?
Yes.
All right. Are any questions from board members or questions from the staff regarding this?
I just want to make sure I understand. I haven't seen the 2011, 2012 special permit. If Chairman Maynard can just simplify that, what is the primary change?
If we went to the plan that is up, if you're seeing the screen sharing there, you're looking at that plan, there's a sort of a rectangular outline on the right side of the restaurant showing a beer cooler, which it has those has those are existing walls. So there's sort of just a very narrow walkway back to the back bathroom there. And that particular wall where that beer cooler is, which is being outlined right now, that is not part of any of the special permits that are in place and have been approved. So we're looking to take those walls down and then go back to that 2012, which was the other document that was being shared that would show the area without those walls in place. So that's the primary interior change there.
And is that wall between you and the pizza place?
No, that's an interior wall. The wall between the restaurant and the pizza place, there are no changes to any of that.
Okay.
All right. So what the question before, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jacinta, the question before the board is, do we think that this is a minimal enough, is this so minimal a change to the property that it does not require a special permit or an amendment to a special permit, and therefore can be approved, this work can be approved by the building commissioner?
That's correct.
And that question is, if we think it's substantial enough and we believe that it needs a special permit, we can vote to allow to say that it's substantial changes and would require a modification of the existing special permit. That's our two choices.
Yes, those are your two choices tonight.
Seems to me is that this is exactly the kind of situation contemplated by the zoning bylaw that allows the building commissioner to make a judgment on the and to follow up on this and to allow this change. And it's going back to the original 2011 plans, and so it brings the property back into compliance with the 2011 special permit. So it seems to me that I would favor a vote of the board that this is not substantial enough to require a modification of the special permit. If there are no questions about that, I would entertain a motion that we approve, that we, it's a sense that, a motion to the effect that there's the sense of the board that the modifications proposed by the applicant return to its original drawings, and that it is not significant enough to require a modification of the special permit.
Mr.
So
Chair,
moved.
Mr. White has his hand up.
Oh, got it. So does Mr. Slobodar. I didn't see either one of those. There we go. Mr. White first.
Just a quick question, if I can, Mr. Chair. Attorney Maynard, you may not know this off the top of your head, but with that having been converted to a beer cooler, with that demolition, I assume there are electrical lines, but are there water drainage lines and what else there?
I can't answer that, but we should have people available that could answer that question for you. Either Manny or Nick may be able to answer that question, or perhaps Walt.
Is whoever, Mr. Nicholas Southwick Hall, please state your name and address and for the record. And you're muted right now, Mr. Southwick. There we go.
It's Nicholas Southwick Hall.
Great. Did you hear the question, Mr. Hall? What's your address for the record?
54 Pine Street, Belchertown, Mass.
Great. Did you hear the question, Mr. Hall?
I did.
All right.
There are no water lines or electrical lines located where the opening is proposed to be made.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions, Mr. White? Mr. Slobodar?
I'm looking at the plans that we were given yesterday. They're on one of the plans on ID 1.1. There's a front elevation that marks new windows. Do we is that relevant to anything we're talking about? Or is that just normally done on extensive plans? I don't even know why I'm looking at the front elevation.
They are changing the windows out and a slight change to the door. So when we were reviewing the plans with the building department, they requested that we submit the rendering
Okay,
showing what the conditions would look like, which are
Okay.
essentially the conditions as they look like now.
okay, but it's not you're not changing anything substantial, and it's still in keeping with the chair's sentiment, which I support, that this is relatively minor and doesn't need anything,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, my only other question is, you're not changing the formulation of the daiquiris, are you?
I'll
That
have to
would be,
Walter
that would
ask
be a
that.
major change, which I may have to object to.
Absolutely not.
Okay, fine. In that case, good. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just one more, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Henry.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we're trying to get this back in compliance with the original permit. What happened? Why it's not in compliance?
Well, if that question is for me, I guess, I mean, I would, I guess the best way I
Well-
could answer it is, at least my clients are hoping to have, and of course, they've been in Amherst for some time with other restaurants, but we're hoping that, we will have a very positive experience with the town and doing things the way they're supposed to be done and properly approved and permitted, and that may not have always been the case with the previous owner.
Mr. Cody, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do.
Just give us your name and address for the record.
It's David Cody. I'm building inspector in Amherst. I live at 79 Gulf Road, Belchertown. So the current floor plan is a result of an enforcement action after we had discovered a much more extensive internal change that blocked access to the toilet facilities and created numerous health code violations, with people having to sneak past the bar and then go through an expanded kitchen. So at this, how that arrived is we were just trying to get it back to where they had legal means of egress and legal access to the toilets.
So in short, work was done that wasn't approved by the town and wasn't filed with the town, and you then subsequently had an enforcement action. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
got it. All right, are there any other questions? If not, I would renew the motion. I think we did have a motion made and seconded, if I recall. If not, let's do it again.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the sense of the ZB of the Amherst Zoning Board of Appeals is that this is a minor change and does not warrant a modification of the existing special permit. The vote occurs on the motion. The chair votes aye. Mr. Meadows,
Aye.
Mr. Sloviter,
Aye.
Mr. Henry,
Aye.
Mr. White.
Aye.
All right, gents, the motion carries 5-0. Congratulations. Good luck with the new ownership of that restaurant, and don't change the mole sauce either.
We will. Thank you very,
Well,
thank you very much.
Yeah, that
Thank-
mole sauce.
thank you,
must
Mr.
be very
Chairman.
good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The next order of business is a public hearing on ZBA FY 2025-19. Research 19 Research Drive. It's 2025-10, 19 Research Drive. Request to modify the FY 2024-01 special permit to increase the caretaker apartment from 14 to 30% residential area for property located at 19 Research Drive, map 19D, parcel 19, BBC, Village Center Business Zoning Districts. We had a site visit on Tuesday. At that site visit, we observed from the outside of the property, observed the exterior buildings. We were taken inside to observe the site of the new proposed caretaker apartment on the second floor of the building. It was in construction. It would be a converted space from an office, and we talked with the owner regarding the reason for that, and that the caretaker was one of two employees living on site for the property. We toured that. We saw the exit and egress. We also saw the existing caretaker apartment, which is on the first floor. It has a model of the type of outfitting and design that would be incorporated into the second floor, second caretaker apartment. I think that pretty much sums up the major parts of that site visit. We have applicant submissions as follows: special permit application, the special permit findings, containing a management plan, a research drive project narrative, and a research drive layout with the second floor proposed design. Planning staff submitted a transmittal sheet to Town Hall and a project application report. There's been no other comments from the town hearing, and there's been no comments from the public that I'm aware of. Has there, Jacinta?
No public comments for
No
this.
public comments. So I think Mr. Ron Laverdier is he going to present, or who's presenting for the applicant?
I'm not sure. I think Claire is here, so I'm going to bring Claire
Okay.
in.
All right.
Ron, if you are here, please raise your hand. But I don't see him.
All right.
Okay. Claire. Well, I'm trying to promote Claire, and
There you go.
yes, okay, fantastic. You're muted, Claire. Oh. She's declining to be promoted as a panelist.
All right.
So who?
Well, there's
Hi,
there
Ron.
you go. All right.
I'm gonna change your name so that we're not thinking that you're Claire.
Okay. Could we get name and address of the person that's going to represent the applicant?
Yep, Ron Laverdier.
Okay.
I'm working on it. We were watching a spinning wheel for a while.
All right. Well, just all I need is your address, then, Mr. Laverdier.
433 West Street, Amherst, Mass.
Got it.
And
We had a good site plan visit. Site visit, and I would ask you just to briefly let us know the extent of the expansion of the residential area for the property and why you are requesting that.
we're requesting the expansion of just let's see here, of 1,100. No. Yes, of 1,046 square feet on the second floor of the building. And the reason we're doing it is because right now the woman who cleans our building, Dulcinea Santos, she has to drive to the building and drive back. And, I thought it would be a really nice thing to do for her, actually, if she could stay at the building. She cleans. She also cleans at the office park. It would reduce her, the amount of miles she has to put on her vehicle. And it would also provide better service for us and the, the commercial tenants in the building, having, the cleaning person right there. Should we need anything else? Our other maintenance person does more of the outdoor, removal of snow, ice, plantings, all those things. But that's Mac Rogers, and he's very happy there. And I thought perhaps we could do a second unit for Dulcinea Santos and both provide better service for our tenants and provide a much needed housing for somebody in the cleaning business.
Got it. And Mr. Liberty, what I understand is that the current bylaw permits 10% of the floor space can be used for residential. You've been your special permit allows currently 15%, which you're pretty close to, and this would double that to about 30%.
Yes,
so
it will. That is correct.
The reason that you're before us here is that this would cause the increase. It would cause you to be out of compliance with the former special permit, and would about double the amount of residential space. And that's the question for the board: is that you're understanding? Okay. So we had a good site visit. I thought it makes perfect sense. There's more than enough parking. There's more than enough area for this, and how you wish to manage your property and manage how your employees live there. It seems to me to make perfect sense, and it doesn't do violence to, I think, the concept or the purpose of the zoning bylaw to allow more residential space in a building where it is used for caretaker services. Do other people have questions or comments? Mr. Sloviter.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment very much in support of this and point out that from what I understand, the space that is being converted into a residence was not office space. So it's not actually reducing commercial space. This was ancillary computer support space, from what I believe I heard the other day, and that it was an independent space. So it's not reducing the commercial rental part of it. This was part of the insurance company's support space. So I think that this will provide housing. There's everything right about this application in terms of the use of space. And I think that the applicant is credible in what he did before when we approved a special permit. So I think everything that I heard makes sense.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a question. I wasn't at the site visit. We recently approved a special permit for a new building. It is in the same park that we're talking about, correct?
No.
No.
Yeah, this is a different park than the one that was on than the other property that he had. That was the one where they were going to construct a new building.
Yes.
That's a different property than this.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Henry, what you might be thinking about, because I had a similar issue, is approximately 8 months ago, we did have a special permit to expand the unit that's in this building that we voted on. That might be what you're thinking of, but on the site visit, we were taken around and shown, because that work's completed, showed everything on the
That's what
special.
you're referring to.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, I was thinking about the other property on 116, off 116. All right. Any other concerns, questions? Since this is a requires a modification of an existing special permit. We have to vote on a special permit. So the first thing we have to do is see if there's any public comment regarding this. And so if members of the public wish to speak on this matter, they should so indicate by using the raise hand function on their phone or on their computer, or pressing *9 on their phone. And Jacinta, I don't think there's any.
No, I'm not
Nobody
seeing
wishes to
anyone
speak.
in the attendees that would like to speak.
Got it. So the last thing is any other questions from members of the board before we move on to the public meeting portion, or any statement from from the applicant before we move to the public meeting portion? If not, I would entertain a motion that we move to a public meeting on this matter while keeping the public hearing open in case we need to gather additional information. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded.
Second.
The chair votes aye. Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Slobiter?
Aye.
Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
All right, we're in the public meeting portion of that motion carries. We're in the public meeting portion of the hearing on this matter. This is typically the place where we deliberate. Doesn't sound like there's a lot of disagreement, but we do have to go through findings and conditions. So if there are any concerns that people have, now's the time to raise them. Otherwise, I'm going to run through conditions and findings and conditions. All right. The first finding is 10.380 and 10.381, dealing with suitability in the neighborhood in which it is proposed. There's already a residence in this development. This is just adding additional one. It's a caretaker apartments are allowed in this zoning district. 10.382, 383, 385, and 387 all deal with various forms of nuisance. This accessory use is not going to create any additional nuisance. It's adding an additional residence, and there's already one residence in place that doesn't create additional nuisances. We find that it doesn't create additional nuisances. 10.384, adequate and appropriate facilities would be provided. The caretaker apartment includes appropriate facilities for the proposed use, that is residential. 10.386 deals with the conformance of the parking signs and regulations. There is plenty of the staff and the applicant have reviewed parking for the building, and that includes an appropriate number of parking spaces as well as ADA spaces. 10.387, proposal provides convenient, safe, and vehicular movement within the site. There's no changes to the traffic plan or to the parking. 10.388 is not applicable because it deals with off-street loading of vehicles, and this does not affect that. 10.389 provides adequate methods of disposal or storage for sewage. The existing management plan in effect does that already. This will remain in place. 10.390 protection from flood hazards. It's not applicable because nothing in the proposed modification would affect floodplains. 10.391 also is not applicable. It deals with unique historic or scenic features. Everything is internal work. 10.392 provides adequate landscaping. There's an existing management plan already, so we find that nothing in this proposed modification will violate 10.392. We can find that. 10.393, the proposal provides for protection of adjacent properties, minimization of light. Again, there's no changes in the lighting plan that's already in place and will remain in place. 10.394 and 10.395, neither of which are applicable. The first deals with the impact of steep slopes, and the second deals with disharmony with respect to the terrain, use, and scale of the architecture. Again, it's all internal buildings, so those do not apply. 10.396 deals with screening for storage areas. Again, the existing management plan deals with this and it remains in place. 10.397 provides adequate recreational facilities, does not apply. Again, there's no changes to that. 10.398, the proposal is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this bylaw and the goals of the master plan. The proposal creates workforce housing and is for an on-site employee, and therefore is consistent with the goals of the master plan. Concerning conditions, are there any objections to those findings? If not, we'll move on to conditions. The conditions shall be built and the project shall be built and maintained according to approved plans and application package. That's our standard language for this. Those plans include sheet A1, first floor plans dated August 8th, 2024. The management plan approved as part of the earlier special permit shall remain in full effect. Number 3, conditions from 2002-00001 and special permit 2022-12 shall remain in full effect. And 4, those are existing special permits. And 4, the accessory apartment shall only accommodate a manager, custodian, security guard, or other employee essential to the operation of the office park. The employee's immediate family or household could be accommodated as well, but only if in agreement with the property manager. Those are the proposed conditions of approval. So I would entertain a motion that we make the findings required out of 10.38 and approve the conditions 1 through 4 as found in the proposed project application report. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion about that? If not, the vote will occur on the conditions and the findings. The chair votes aye. Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Sloboda?
Aye.
Now the vote occurs on approval of the modifications as conditions, with conditions. Could have all done it in one motion, but I broke it down in two kind of inefficiently. So I would entertain a motion to approve the request for a modification to the existing special permit. Special permit FY 2024-01.
So moved.
Is it second? Moved and seconded.
Second.
Chair votes aye. Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Sloboda?
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations. You're going to have I hope you have a very happy employee who's living on site. Good luck.
She'll be happy just to hear that we've been approved. I'm sure of that. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to make that
Oh.
clarification.
You know what? I didn't close the hearing, did I?
Well, that too.
Yeah. Yep.
But just for the record, the motion was for FY 25-10.
Was the 25 dash, what I meant is that 24 was the previous, wasn't that the previous?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
the
we're amending
previous
that
one.
previous special permit, right?
Oh, yes.
You are
Okay.
right, I did not move to close the hearing on that, but I think we can assume that that's been effectively done. And we're not gonna have a third vote on something that we don't need.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
But I think that's good. All right. The next order of business is ZBA FY 2025-09, 6365 Salem Street. The applicant seeks to come into compliance with ZB zoning bylaws 7.0001 and 7.0002 per an enforcement letter that was received regarding parking for property located at 63-65 Salem Street, map 15A, parcel 77, RG, General Residence Zoning District. We had a site visit. I'm just going to get my material here. We had a site visit on Tuesday, which we looked at the property. We saw the existing parking of several cars on the property. We went through it with the architect and the engineer to outline where the proposed parking would take place. We looked at the houses we could see the houses on both sides. We looked at the planting that mentioned would be either added or some taken down. I observed that the garages, one had, which were we asked how the garage is going to be used. Currently, they're used for storage. In the garage, I observed what looked to be a long table with beer cups on it and some storage in the second garage. And we walked to see where the curb cut would be for the parking on the side of the house. I think that's pretty much. We had a conversation with Mr. Sparkle about the desire to try to provide more parking for the residents of the property. I think that pretty much sums up the nature of the site visit. Here we go. All right. In addition, we have the following submissions. Special permit application submitted October 7th. A project summary submitted October 7th. Salem Street submittal also October 7th. We have a ZBA application, which includes parking expansion, prepared by Zengineer dated 7 October 2024. Deed survey, copy of 2 leases, sample and tenant lease notice, sample certificate of tenant lease notices, Salem Street plan submitted October 28th, 2024, supplemental submission submitted October 28th, 2024, and supplemental planning plan submitted November 11th, 2024. Town comments, we have comment from Jason Skeels, a town engineer, requesting that the applicant add 3 to 5 feet of asphalt apron for the new grass driveway. And from Eric Jock, wetlands administrator, the Conservation Committee has not yet received an application. Mitigation will be the question, as well as the applicant proposing to offset the amount of air alteration that is proposed. We have 3 public comments that I'm aware of. First one is by Sanjay Arwadi. That's from December 10th, 2024. We've received an email from Michael Orland, which is from dated December 12th. And we received an email from Mary Clark, dated December 12th. And we received, that's it. Those are the 3 public comments that we have received. I don't think there are any other public comments, are there, Jacinta?
None that have been written or submitted via writing.
All right. So, Mr. Sparkle, are you going to be representing the applicants?
Yes, I am.
Great. Can you give us a little background, your name and address for the record, of course?
Yes, absolutely. Well,
Give us a little background, and anybody else will be speaking also.
Okay. My name is Bucky Sparkle. I'm a civil engineer based out of Leeds, Northampton, right over the river. I believe also the property owner, Joe Balintfee, is with us this evening, although I'm going to be managing this presentation and answering the board's questions. I have put together hopefully about a 10-minute presentation to cover some of the details of the application and the site, and I'd like to just share my screen and run through that if I may.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Sparkle.
Clicking on the correct button. All right. So starting off at the beginning, we have a recent photo. This is actually off of Google Maps for the property. And as you can see, there's a reason we got an enforcement letter on this one. We have 1 car parked off in the grass. We have a total of 3 cars parked into what is the front setback. These are very shallow lots, so there's a lot of front setback on these properties. Just to be clear, I should also mention that the owner, Joe Balintfee, is here, but also Valley Rental Company is technically the applicant on this. I don't want to leave them out of the equation. They've been very helpful in helping me prepare the application. Very quickly, the basics of the property. We have Main Street and Salem Street. So this is the 3rd to last house on a dead-end street. There are no properties across the street, no development across the street until you get all the way down to Main Street. It's zoned RG. It's just under a ½ acre. It is a duplex. building that was constructed in 1965 and has been operated as a rental, to my understanding, that entire time period. Residential lawn, woods, wetlands. It gently slopes from the road to the east and is on town water and sewer. And then to summarize the application, I mentioned an enforcement letter. Ed Smith wrote that letter, indicated that the cars do need to be on a reinforced surface and the setback issue. So there are also other bylaws, lots of bylaws that apply to parking. Ones that I want to point out for this meeting is that in cases where there are 5 or more cars parked on a property, you try to avoid cars that park each other in, and you want to create a circulation pattern, ideally within a larger parking lot where cars don't back out into the street. So we'll talk about that as we get into this. We do need to go in front of the Conservation Commission, and in discussing things with the administrator, Aaron Jacques over there, it seemed better to start with the ZBA and then move to them. So there'll be more discussions, I'm sure. Now, the purpose of the application is to bring the property into compliance. And so we have a plan for that. There are 8 bedrooms, there are 8 tenants, and that has been the case for almost half a century now. And accordingly, parking is an incidental use to residential properties. We are planning on doing a mixture of asphalt paving up to the garage, but also adding grass pavers in an area of yards so there's a firm parking surface. We would need 1 additional constrained light that's not too bright. I have details on that. We will be providing screening for the vehicles through a variety of vegetation buffers, 3 different screens, and proposing a fence as well. And on a site that has no stormwater BMPs or improvements, we're also adding some meaningful stormwater improvements. I do want to point out, as was brought to my attention, I think today, maybe it was Tuesday, by Rob Mora, the building commissioner, bylaw 9.22, does help qualify what's going on here, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with it. My paraphrase is that the ZBA may authorize a non-conforming use, and this is a use issue, provided that you don't find that the situation, the new use, is more detrimental to the existing neighborhood than the existing non-conforming use. And I think that's really important. The existing non-conforming use for half a century has been a duplex rental with 4 bedrooms and has had affiliated with it 8 and sometimes more cars over quite a number of years. So this is the use that is driving the application in many regards. Also, I have talked about the history a little, so I'll move through this quickly. It has been in the Belinfey family. It was purchased by Joe's parents in 1976. It has always been an non-owner occupied rental, so there's no change there. It became Joe's property in 1985. And so there's been a very static situation for decades. In the last few decades, there have been multiple property management companies, and in the last 8 years, just so the board is aware, the owner, Joe, has invested over $300,000 in property improvements. So those are mostly interior improvements, but he is willing and looking forward to improving the parking situation because they know it's problematic. And I also kind of want to just bring in this little bit of side fact regarding cars and what's been going on. So the owners haven't really done anything different. They haven't done anything wrong. When this property was built, it was less than half a car per person, but these days it's 0.85 cars per people, and that's on average. And of course, as students rent in more and more properties in Amherst, and the student population themselves are getting cars more and more regularly, really there's a several times factor increase between what was happening back in the 70s and what's happening today. All right, now to look at the property, I know most of you have been there already, but the bird's eye view here, Salem Street is on the west side. Directly across the street is a wetland. Directly behind the property, the house, is a wetland. There are a few bits of landscaping vegetation, and You can see grayed out slightly it's a combination of the paved driveway and the gravel additions that have been put onto the driveway. And you can see this is from, I think this is from the Amherst, most recent Amherst aerial imagery. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 vehicles in what is a very small area. 1965, no problem. 2024, problem. And there are multiple issues with that, as I think is quite obvious. Looking at what we're trying to do and how we're going to hopefully change this. We are looking to, up to the garage area, keep the driveway, traditional asphalt. Overall, it is actually square footage, a little less area than the current parking surfaces. So we are reducing the impervious area. We are reconfiguring it, of course, trying to make this work. And we are also expanding a grass paver system that will have the look and feel of a residential lawn in this sort of olive hatched out area here. 2 of the spaces are compact right here, but the rest are full size 9 by 18 parking spaces. Some important things about the layout here. When I first sat down with, I'm going to zoom in, but when I first sat down for the pre-submittal meeting with, Ed Smith, who wrote this, and Rob Mora and other members of the planning department, I showed up with multiple parking configuration plans. Like how many different ways could we try and resolve this problem and bring us into compliance? And this approach seemed to be the best. Just because it's pre-existing non-conforming, there's no way to fully bring it in to the zoning bylaw requirements. There has to be some kind of waiver involved. So in looking up at those options where this seemed to be the best, safest, most reasonable way to do it. A couple things to point out, this blue line that runs vertically is, I'm highlighting the front setback line. So we're only allowed 2 cars in the front setback, so that are these 2 spaces. The other 6 spaces are all inside the yard, so within the main building area of the lot, 2 spaces in front of the garage. And it's true that if the garage spaces were used, that would be great, but because we can't park cars in, it doesn't actually change this geometry at all. It would just leave more open driveway in front of the house. And I also got some feedback today from the property manager where they have trouble encouraging people to park in the garage. It is apparently very narrow. They sent me some pictures. There's very little room to open your door. Younger drivers are not nervous. They hate using the garage. They don't want to use it. And also, since it doesn't really change the layout, whether or not that's incorporated into the plan, and the space is used for other purposes inside the house. Let's see, lighting, we have, well, let's go with the landscaping. Right now, there's no screening buffer whatsoever for the existing condition. What we want to do is preserve the existing apple tree, add in a dense evergreen buffer through here, screening buffer on this side. Again, a dense roadside evergreen buffer through here, a thickly vegetated mix of shrubbery on the south side, and are proposing a wooden privacy fence for the benefit of the property to the north. I also understand that this property has actually said that they're not too interested in this fence. So, maybe the fence isn't going to happen, but it is certainly offered. In the back of the yard, more of a Conservation Commission issue. We're going to ideally convert the existing bordering vegetated wetland that's being mowed into native plant species, put an additional 12 shrubs to help border that. All the plantings are, they're native, they're all pollinator friendly. Many of them came from the UMass pollinator list. Although surprisingly, that list is mostly non-native species. So I would like to talk to whoever put that list together. The paved areas are going to be designated with striped painting. So, there'll be a couple of stripes here. The unpaved areas that are in the grass, they'll have wheel stops to indicate where the locations are. I do want to get to lighting. So right now there are 2 lights at the corners of each garage. Up until recently, these were actually dysfunctional. I got a message today that they have been replaced with functional lighting that my understanding matches what I submitted. The new light would be mounted on the corner of the building here. And it would also be a low luminosity. It's equivalent to a 100-watt incandescent bulb. It is 2 adjustable lights that are shielded that will point down. They will be set lower in elevation than, if I scroll up a little bit, you can see it's 71 Salem Street. The south side of this building is a garage, 1 story and 1.5 with the peak in the roof. This section of the building is 2-story, and according to a letter I received, there is a bedroom window here that's actually higher than the roof. This window is higher by a few feet than the height of this light. This light will be lower that window, it will be pointed down, it will be shielded, and if the neighbors are interested, it will also be on the other side of a fence, higher than the fence, but it still helps prevent glow bouncing off of the buildings. And let's see, nearly done here. Just a few other additional details that I want to cover. I'll start on the right side. You can see the graphic. This is just an excerpt from the HydroCAD program I use. We did a stormwater analysis. The short answer is we are reducing the flow rate by 1/3 with this project. We're reducing the flow volume by 40%. So these are major improvements to groundwater quality, flood control, et cetera, for downstream abutters. Other details about the project, we are requesting a waiver from bylaw 7.106, which indicates that vehicles are supposed to circulate within the site and not back out onto the street. There is very, very little space between the building and the street. So there was no way with the existing conditions to create some sort of internal road and traditional parking lot. Like, we are working with what was put down in 1965 and doing our best. But in support of that waiver, backing out on the street, you know, we've all, most of us at least, have been there. We had our site meeting, I think all of it standing in the middle of the pavement. No vehicles came by, only 2 houses are past this. It's very, very low traffic. There aren't even houses on the other side of the road. So as far as potential conflicts with traffic, being able to back out on this particular street is a very minor consideration. And I know the public is going to be discussing, you know, their views, I'm sure, shortly. They sent several letters in. There were some themes, so I thought I'd sort of preemptively talk about those to a small degree. A couple of sort of the fluff, what I call the insights here. A couple of the letters. So there were 3 letters from 2 different properties. So 2 letters from one of the properties. These letters actually did mention that they have enjoyed and even like living alongside students. Unusual to hear that. Of course, they also talked about some of the problems that students have. So, you know, I hear both sides of that, but it's not a complete disaster out there. They appreciate some of the features of the plan, the pervious paving, the landscape buffers, which do not block any of the cars right now. So have a much softer feel with the plan as proposed. It was called a careful and thoughtful plan by, it turns out, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at UMass. So I'm going to pat myself on the back just a little bit for that. Another neighbor talked about, well, back in 1978, there were 4 cars there. Well, earlier I showed that, you know, back in the 70s, there weren't as many cars per person in the United States. These days, it's basically double. So 8 cars is a very reasonable amount of cars for this situation and this long-term use. It has had 8 bedrooms. The neighbors talk about so many extra parking spaces needed. There were themes in these letters. A couple of people, you know, I think, well, erroneously indicated that there have been 10 or more tenants here. There is no history or record of that. There was a complaint 14 years ago indicating that maybe there were more than 8 people living there. That property manager made an in-person inspection. And I read the memo they wrote and said each unit had only 4 bedrooms intended for single occupancy. They were not in violation of the terms of the lease. There have never been more than 8 tenants in this rental. Some of the comments from the public say, well, just rent to fewer tenants. This has been going on for half a century, and coming in now to a property owner and a business and say, well, now you can't do what you've been doing longer than almost anybody else has been living on the street nearly, that obviously that is not a viable perspective. Some of the letters talked about 8 parking spaces or parked cars, or 13 parked cars. So through the special permit, as I'm sure you're aware, the conditions are going to very strictly control the property. Right now, it's controlled only by the property manager and the owner, who is not local. The property management company is, and it's Valley Rentals right now. I think they've been doing a fairly good job from what I hear. But the conditions of a special permit will very strictly control the amount of cars available. So the concern about 8 or more than 8 cars should go away. And if it doesn't, there is a very significant penalty that would be incurred for the property owner. So this is really one of the best protections for the abutters, is to install a codified special permit. There were concerns about lighting. I actually think I already talked about those. There was a question that the fence is maybe not desirable, maybe out of character with the neighborhood. It's totally by right to install. Yet, if the neighbor doesn't want it, it was mostly for their benefit. So we're happy to remove it. And there was also the idea that more spaces are going to equate to more vehicles, which I just talked about. And that is pretty difficult once a special permit is in place. And that wraps up, as many details about this as I could get together here. And there's the stop share button. I'm happy to talk about any of the questions you have and bring up the imagery if you like.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sparkle. One quick question in discussing the lighting. They're all dark sky compliant and they would comply with the ZBA's rules and regulations. Is that right?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, and you will adjust the lighting so it doesn't trespass upon the neighbor's property. Is that
Happily so, and I can likely volunteer for the owner and property manager that the neighbor can have a say in how those are angled. Like if we just need enough light to safely get to the vehicles and keep that very dark corner from being dark, and we can wiggle those lights any way that works for them.
I noticed that the house to the south of 6365 sits a little bit lower than 6365. I think there's a, and you're proposing a vegetative barrier or between 6365 and the house to the south. Is that right?
That is correct.
And typically that barrier is 5 feet. That probably, and number one, it may need to be higher if you're going to park on that, have that angled parking that points directly into that house next door to the south. Number one. Number two, you're looking at vegetative barrier, and the kinds of vegetation you put in can be worthless in 4 to 5 months of the year if it's not an evergreen kind of continuously leafed or opaque property. So got two problems with that property next door. One of which is the height of the cars, which would be higher than if it was flat, and secondly is what's the material you're going to use.
Okay. Well, we can modify that planting. I was hoping for a little more biodiversity than is available in just the native evergreen population.
Sure.
But we have no problem with modifying that to be more obfuscated more consistently.
So you'd have to look at something to give the benefit to the, I think that would be a benefit to the neighbors and not have the lights, those cars shining directly into their house. And you're right. I wanted to make a point that one of the benefits of a special permit on property that does not currently have a special permit is that it gives the town and the ZBA the ability to address some of the concerns neighbors have. If we didn't have that, you'd have to find a way to comply with the the parking without being in violation, but we wouldn't have the ability to talk about landscaping or other things that might be a problem for neighbors. And so that there's a value to a special permit that we should be aware of. I do have a question about the garages. I looked in. It looks like one of the garages is it seems to me it's an indoor beer pong room, and I know most beer pong is conducted outside, and perhaps it's a particular draw for this property to have an indoor beer pong facility, but it can be used for a car too. And next door, the other garage looked to have only a couple of boxes in it. And I don't know if that was beer pong, but it was a large table with lots of red plastic glasses, which seems to be the town sport. So talk to me about why you're not using the garage. You got two garages there. There's two cars could park there. Is there a basement in this property?
Actually, I think there is, but I don't know if
There's no basement?
Joe is here. He could confirm it.
Valentin, can you give us your name and address, please?
Yeah, my name is Joe Belinfi. I live at 303 Sweet Bay Place in Carborough, North Carolina. And while the house has a basement, it's more closely related to what I would call a crawl space. It does have a solid cement foundation, but it has a low ceiling. I think the ceiling is only about 6 or 7 feet. It's not really finished. It's not heated. It can be used for storage at best,
Right.
but it is not really a living space. Thank you.
But it could be used for storage. If need be.
It's not ideal for storage because it's not temperature controlled, and it can be musty down there. It's a wet area, so that it would be damp.
Sure. And do tenants have access to it?
Yes.
They do. Okay, so it's their ability to, if they wish to, they could put stuff there, but it might be inappropriate for what they wish to store. All right. So why wouldn't you use the garages? You said they're narrow. I mean, we've all had time in our life when we had to drive into a narrow garage. And I can tell you that even with a not so narrow garage, accidents happen. I can personally attest to side view mirrors that get knocked off, but we all have to deal with that. So why aren't you using that? Why doesn't this plan include the use of the garages?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Henry?
you cannot play beer pong outside when it's winter.
I know you can't. You can't. And that's why I think it may be really an attractive feature. It may be more important than a parking space renting of the house. But
well, I will say that the beer pong tournament never came up during my discussions with my clients. In fact, I was amused to learn by the current use of the garage. In terms of the plan, is it technically possible the garages can be used? Yes, I will not deny that. I don't think anybody is denying that. I'm going to share my screen again, though, and indicate why it almost doesn't matter. And the reason for that is you still can't park vehicles in. So say we had, here, let me get creative here, a vehicle parked here. All right, and come on. There we go. Here in the garage, great. We cannot have a vehicle parked anywhere else on the driveway. So we don't gain any parking by using the garage. We don't lose any impervious area by parking in the garage. We still just get, now this is in violation of the bylaw. It's actually one of the things we are trying to unravel as a result of this application, or through this application.
it's not a violation of the bylaw. The bylaw seeks to try to encourage that, but all over town, cars are parked behind each other, all over town.
When there's 5 or more parking spaces, my understanding, I think it's bylaw 1 or 7.1002.
Yep, it is.
Right. Then it says for the vehicles, well, it says vehicles, I believe it says in the front setback, but this property is also a lot of front setback, cannot park each other in, and we're supposed to have free and clear access for emergency vehicles.
Yeah, that's and it's something that we could waive, but and all over town, people are parking behind. I see cars parked behind cars all over town, and I don't think it's a unusual thing. But anyway, I take your point that
It's not unusual.
I take your point that that's 7.0002, but it isn't unwaivable or unamendable by us if we choose to do that.
Certainly, and the reality is, to a large degree, I think we are open to all other solutions, and if stacking vehicles works better for the town, the neighbors, the board, we'll stack vehicles. That's the existing condition, really.
Right.
So there's no opposition to that. What this plan does is the best possible job of meeting the zoning bylaw that we can, especially when consulted with Rob Moore and others. So we'll stack cars, but it doesn't. It can reduce the impervious area. We can reduce where some of these other spaces are, and we're open to that. And it's less construction, less money.
Yeah. One other question. I don't mean to be adversarial, but I drove down that street today just to take a look at it again, and there's no other property that has the number of were obviously places where cars had parked in front of it than that property has. There are properties that have a driveway runs alongside the house. There's some cars parked in the back. There's others, but that property, more so than any other property on the street, has a feel of having a lot of cars in the front yard, more than any of the others. And I can understand concern about what that feels like for neighbors who live on that street and who have parked in back or have garages in the back, etc. And I also noticed that you had cars parked associated with the house, because they're parked out in front of it, parking on the street. So that's another. I think it's another problem. Evidently, for some reason, it's no parking, and I don't know why, but it's no parking there. But so, what's the response from you in terms of design to having all these? You'll have a lot of cars. You'll have at least 6 parked in the front, 2 parked visibly on the side. You've got 8 cars in your plan that are going to be obvious to everybody, the neighbors, and I can see where people would be concerned about that.
Okay, it's a fair concern. This property is a little bit different than the other properties on Salem Street. There is only one other rental. It is the one to the south that we talked about.
Yep.
Everybody else is a single-family home. I think somebody does an Airbnb on Salem Street, but they have a large property. This particular building, in 1965, constructed as a duplex, 4 bedrooms. It has been rented out since 1976. Same use, 8 occupants renting this for half a century. And of course, as population, trends shift and people have more cars, the number of cars that are affiliated with the use, and every other use in town that has people, we have more cars there. So pre-existing non-conforming use. What we're trying to do is clean it up, preserve the yards, hide the vehicles, improve the stormwater. Does that change the aesthetic? It does. The buffering certainly will. The cars are currently just right out there and muddy messes in the yard. That's not really doing anybody any favors. But this has been the case for decades. Which is why we're just going to try and do the best that we can with what's available. It's not to tell the people you cannot operate your property, as has been the case for 48 years.
Let other people, other members of the board, ask questions, have comments. I don't want to dominate the time.
Well, I'll make a quick comment. Mr. Belanfy, I find it rather hilarious that I'm assuming you moved from Massachusetts down to North Carolina, and I moved from Wilmington, North Carolina, up to Amherst, Massachusetts. So,
Actually this is my 3rd college town. I went from Amherst, Massachusetts to College Park, Maryland. Now I'm just outside of Chapel Hill. So I know the college town life pretty well. Yes.
Mr. Sloviter.
I just want to clarify something that Mr. Sparkle said, that I think he said something different on Tuesday at the site visit, or I heard it wrong, but I just want to clarify. I thought, Mr. Sparkle, that you said that the current owner of the property had grown up or lived in the property, and that he left the property when his parents moved, and that was when it became a rental property. So what is the chronology of that? Because that's a little bit at odds that this has been a rental duplex from the very beginning.
You're right. You're astute to point that out. I'm going to just say flat out, I did not fully understand the history of that. I had, previous to that meeting, a little bit of history, and then in the last couple of days, I got a lot of history from the owners and the property managers. So the reality is, and Joe, please step in at any point if I am wrong, but Joe grew up in the area. He grew up in the neighborhood, but his family did not live there. When they purchased it, and I thought originally it was 1970. It turns out 1976 they purchased it, and they rented out as non-owner occupied both sides of that duplex from the moment they owned it. And he only lived in the area. And then eventually, after his parents were no longer operating the facility, he ended up inheriting it. I believe it was an inheritance. So.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't have the exact history on Tuesday.
Okay.
And my apologies. Part of that was my family and I moved to Amherst in 1970, but my parents didn't get the rental property until 1976. So when I had been talking to Mr. Sparkle earlier, I had conflated those mixed up those two dates. But yeah, I was in Massachusetts. I was in Amherst from 1970 until probably around 1983. But we never, as a family, lived in the property.
Okay.
Had it been student rentals the whole time? Or was it single families or a mixture?
So in 1976, I was only about 8 years old, and I don't remember exactly. What I can tell you for sure is that it would have always been a preference, but as far as I can recall, it's always been rented out to students, just because that's where the demand has been.
Well, there's a lot more demand today than there was in '76, but you could have. Yeah, I mean, the number of students today must be triple or quadruple the number there was in the middle '70s. But so we don't know the answer to that. That's fair. That's fair, especially if an 8-year-old. I appreciate that. I guess the other question I have is the bylaw assumes that it allows us to waive this or modify it as whatever our judgment is, but the bylaw suggests 2 parking spaces per unit, which would be a total of 4. You have public transportation just down the road, very easy to get. You have the ability to say to people, they can have 2 cars in unit 1 and 2 cars in unit 2. You can deal with it that way. You could restrict the number of people that could park on your property. You're not required to provide 4 spaces for people by the zoning bylaw, and you could have less. You could have 6. You could have 4. We could even have less if we deemed it, but 2 seems to be the pretty much standard number that we apply in most cases, given normal residential circumstances. What is your reaction to the notion of fewer parking spaces available on the property? Either Mr. Sparkle or Mr. Belmont.
I'm sure Joe has an opinion. What I understand is a few things. One is as a business owner myself, there's effectively a supply and demand situation. Parking spaces are valuable, and if you have parking spaces and then they are taken away after quite a long period of time, that is problematic and definitely an unusual burden that any business owner would sustain. So, effectively throwing out a source of revenue is not attractive, I am sure. And In this particular, layout, there aren't a lot of times where you add more parking spaces and decrease the impermeable area and increase the amount of vegetation and shrubbery on site. So it seems unintuitive to make a restriction. The rental permit has had 8 cars, or yeah, I think the rental permit has had 8 cars on it, even though the parking plan from way back in the day has always just had 5. So there's been an understanding, at least on their side of the equation, even when the permits came into place, that there were 8 occupants, there would be 8 cars. Parking plan did not show that. I think that's a relic back from the Eagle Crest management days, and and sort of the status quo just kept moving forward until we got to the special permit. So to me, it seems unattractive to get rid of a revenue stream and an asset.
I mean, yeah, you don't charge for parking. It's just incorporated in the rent. And so what you're saying is you wouldn't be able to demand $1,000 a month per room if you didn't have 4 parking spaces, is what you're saying.
Amenities, yeah. If the house had a hot tub, they'd be able to charge more. I'm sure of it. So it's similar. And
it's that beer pong table. That's going to really drive up the cost.
I didn't know that was included in the facilities accoutrement.
It's a joke. I didn't.
It's a good joke. It's a good joke. I've been laughing about it since it was discovered.
Yeah. Before I go to Mr. Sloboda, so anyway, one thing to think about that we need to think about is whether there's balancing the need to allow balancing the wishes of the current owner to maintain the number of parking, to maintain 8 cars versus the effect it has on the neighbors if the number of cars are visibly reduced, some which could be inside. And that's really that's what we are looking at, is trying to balance those 2 competing concerns, it seems to me. Mr. Sloboda, you had a question.
I have a question about the number of cars that would be on the property at any given time. If there are 8 occupants and they're allowed 8 cars, I'm asking Mr. Sparkle, I guess, primarily, does this mean there will never be visitors? Because if there are visitors who drive there, they can only park on the property if the car is stacked behind someone else. So how are you anticipating addressing visitors under whatever circumstances, people who visit from out of town or visit for the evening or visit for a beer pong tournament or whatever is the attraction? What happens when someone comes to the property who is not one of the 8 tenants?
Sure, I'll do my best to address that. I do believe the property manager and owner are probably better suited overall. I know this challenge comes up whenever we're working with residential situations. We have bylaws says 2 cars per residential unit. It doesn't address if there's 1 bedroom or 4 bedrooms in that unit. It's just a blank number. So I always have found that to be a little bit unusual. When you design a septic system, it's based on number of bedrooms, not on how big the house is. So I've never felt that the limitation was reasonable. I do know there are properties with special permits that I've been involved in where there is no visitor parking whatsoever, and you're allowed 4 parking spaces. You've got 6 bedrooms. I mean, there's not enough parking for the people who want to live there. So that means that visitors would have to park elsewhere and walk in, or they would have to coordinate with the owners to make sure that there was adequate space on site to park. It is possible that the property managers may say, well, we're going to say only 6 cars from tenants can be here, and we'll have 2 extra parking spaces for when there are visitors. Maybe they make that choice, which is why I say that choice really is, I think, more of a property management issue than an engineering issue in the moment. And Joe, if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear, because I hate to talk for you in this particular regard.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Sparkle. I actually appreciate your insights. And The best thing that I can say is actually kind of connecting both of those two comments and echoes what Mr. Sparkle says, is that the reality of the demographics and the way people commute and move around. I mean, I do remember when I first was working with property managers in the 80s and 90s, there were less students that had cars. They did take public transportation. They walked, they took their bicycles. It was an affordability and accessibility issue that the students, the tenants, they didn't have access to it. That just simply has changed since then. And there's the reality that the streets and the parking lots, in my opinion, just sort of need to catch up with the demand of society these days. And to echo what I heard, this is not an adversarial thing. This is, I want everyone. I want the tenants, the neighbors, the town, me as an owner. We all want the same thing. We want this to be efficient and equitable and fair. I mean, I think the tenants, what would it say to a tenant if we were renting out a great location, but forcing them to take the bus or ride the bike, especially in the Amherst winters? I remember those. So I'm trusting Mr. Sparkle and our property managers and the town, we can all work together to find an equitable solution. I hope that helps.
Other comments or questions from members of the board? So we're coming up on 7:30 when we normally take our 5-minute break. What I'd like to do is take that break now, and we come back at 7:30. It's 7:32. We come back at 7:37, and then I'd like to ask a question about the status of your of what you need to do with the Concom, and then I want to open it up for public comment, and then of course the applicant can respond to the public comment at that time. So take 5 and we'll be back. All right?
Thank you.
Okay, it's 7:38. Let's try to gather everybody again. Great. We'll wait for Mr. Henry and Mr. Sloviter to sign in. All right, great. So, Mr. Sparkle, can you go through where you are, your interactions with the Concom, and what do you expect to have to do there, and how does that affect your plans for this, for the parking?
Absolutely.
What are the
interactions so far have been relatively brief. It was some emails and the pre-submittal hearing where I sat down with Aaron Jacques and looked at, like I said, I showed up with multiple options about how might we resolve and come into compliance with the enforcement letter. And because there is, and I'm happy to bring it up on screen, but essentially the site is sandwiched in between wetlands. There's a whole bunch of buffer zone. It's nothing but buffer zone within the yard, in this front yard. In Amherst, the 50-foot buffer zone is supposedly a no-touch disturb area. Of course, there's a whole bunch of disturbance there already, so we're trying to minimize that. And then there's a little bit of the 50 to 100 zone. So it's challenging in some regards. We're looking. I have a notice of intent, all packaged up, ready to go, pretty much as soon as this meeting is over. And you know, in case there were massive wholesale changes that came out of tonight's meeting. So, you know, if there are massive wholesale changes that board members are considering, please let me know, so I'm not wasting the Conservation Commission's time by sending a plan that's never going to happen. So we do have to go through that process, the public hearings, et cetera. We're going to be doing some mitigation. Even though we are converting yard to yard with this new additional parking, it is still considered disturbance, and it's in an area where we would normally have to provide mitigation of one type or another. We're disturbing about 1,400 square feet of yard, and hopefully as a mitigation measure, the commission will accept that we are taking more than 1,500 square feet of the backyard that's currently a mowed monoculture, churning it under, planting native species seedlings, New England wet mix, and installing a permanent vegetative buffer that will keep lawnmowers and general users out of that space in perpetuity. There's a deed restriction that's created as well to help preserve the resource areas on site.
Okay.
But we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, but you don't have any. All right, so you have to begin the process. You've had some conversations, but you haven't begun the process yet with ComCom. So we're in a situation where even if we make a decision tonight, ComCom could say that, you know, they have great problems with this, and we'd be back on our plate.
It is not often that I would request that the ZBA not make a decision tonight. I really would rather keep both hearings open so I can, if there are wholesale changes that the commission requests, I can come back here with a modified plan, and we can discuss the merits of that or revision, as opposed to, of course, well, we have a public hearing, say we were fortunate enough to receive the board's approval, but now we have to modify a special permit. So I do need to bounce back and forth. I would prefer we don't close out the meeting tonight.
All right. Before we go to public comment, anything from the board members? If not, this is an opportunity for the public to weigh in on their view on this matter. Oh, and Ms. Williams, I sent you a text. Take a look at that. If
Okay.
After we bring in one of the.
Okay.
If anybody wants to speak.
Janet Winston wishes to speak.
Okay. Ms. Winston, can you please give your name and address for the record? There we go. Ms. Winston, you're muted right now.
Even the
There we
video
go.
is off. Okay.
All right, we hear you
Um,
loud and clear. Can you give us your name and address, please, for the record, and keep your comments to around 3 minutes, or something like that.
I'm Janet Winston, and I live at 37 Salem Street and have lived here since 1981, at which time that particular house that we're discussing there was a family with one child that lived there for several years. I don't remember exactly, 3 or 4 years. And on the other side of the house were two sisters who were out of graduate school and in the area working part-time in various places. One of them became a professor at Holyoke Community College. I don't remember when they moved out. It probably was, I don't know, into the early 80s, I guess. So I just wanted to mention it has not always been rental for a number of students on both sides of the house. It definitely was a smaller, it was for a small family or 2 adult individuals. That's what I wanted to add to the information about the background, the history of that house. That's it.
That's it?
Yes.
All right.
you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Winston. I see we have Sanjay Awadi.
Yes, I'll bring him in.
Are you on mute?
We can turn.
So, Ms. Winston, you might want to mute your, yep. Mr. Arwadi, is that correct?
Arwadi, you've done very well, Mr. Judge. Thank you.
All right. Name and address, please.
I'm Sanjay Arwadi. Yep, I'm Sanjay Arwadi. I live at 71 Salem Street, the property immediately abutting 6365 to the north.
Got it.
Shall I proceed?
You may proceed. Yep.
All right,
yes.
thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to the commission and offer comment. I appreciate it. I'll do my best to be concise. I did submit written comment, which I hope the board members have had a chance to read. It sounds like they have. And I am the aforementioned professor of civil engineering at UMass. It is a good and thoughtful plan, and I appreciate actually very much the time, effort, and money that was put into preparing this plan. I think I'm only supposed to address the board, but Mr. Belinfy, hello, it's nice to meet you. I don't know if you recall, but we actually spoke by phone probably back in 2008 for a little while. And so I am grateful for the effort that's being put into bringing the property into compliance in some form. There are actually many things to like about the plan, the pervious pavement, the substantial planting, even the work in the backyard. It's very much appreciated. With regard to history, notwithstanding what various management companies may have told to Mr. Sparkle, the property has been overoccupied frequently in the past 15 years. I've lived here since 2006. My wife and I make a habit of collecting names and phone numbers from the occupants of the rental property next door, and there have often been 10 residents and sometimes as many as 11. There have frequently been as many as 10 cars regularly parked, and I think the maximum one year was 13 cars being regularly parked at the property. So those are my facts as an observer of the property over the last 18 years now. I do like living in a mixed neighborhood with students, and it is not lost on me that without students at the University of Massachusetts, I have neither profession nor an ability to live in Amherst. So I am not against student rentals. I believe that student rentals existing in mixed neighborhoods are healthy for the town of Amherst. And I, for the most part, like living next to them. This year's group of tenants, there are 4 on each side, is correctly occupied. One side actually possesses 0 cars this year, which is unusual and quite impressive. And they have been totally delightful neighbors engaging with us as adults, engaging with my son, and so on. That said, I have some concerns about the plan as presented. We've talked about lighting a lot. I will say that the spots designated to the north of 6365 also pose a significant potential noise hazard to our house, and particularly to the bedroom window on our second floor that faces south. We need to recognize that students are often arriving back at their house as late or early as 1, 2 in the morning. Doors are being opened and closed, car doors, and conversations are being had outside those vehicles at that time of night. So it's not simply the lighting, it's also a significant potential increase in noise exposure there. I think that the plan seeks a parking arrangement in which there is no stacking of vehicles. I appreciate that as an objective, and particularly as something that appears to be at least in compliance with the intent of some bylaws. As I indicated in my written comments, there are as many as 19 potential spots for vehicles to park. And again, my experience living next to the property for the past 18 years is that every place that is available will be used at times. And so I believe that that extra improved ground constitutes something of an attractive nuisance. That is a significant issue for me. I just have two more brief things. I know I'm over 3 minutes, but I'll try to wrap up quickly. In terms of what I've learned and heard during the course of the hearing, I would support and favor stacking of vehicles, even if that requires a variance to bylaws. The students who have lived there, they regularly stack vehicles and they seem to work it out. And it would reduce the overall amount of improved ground and reduce the extra space that might become unintended extra parking. And I want to close with just a comment about enforcement in the town of Amherst. It's been noted that with a special permit, the opportunities for enforcement will increase. Enforcement in Amherst is fundamentally complaint-based. And a complaint-based enforcement mechanism puts the neighbors, me in this case, into a difficult position of having to complain against our neighbors. And so that's a reason why I particularly, and I think others who have submitted written comment and verbal comment, are speaking up about some of what we see as the dangers of this plan. Dangers is overstating things, but you get what I'm saying, right? Because we have very few opportunities to influence the use of these properties, and putting us in a position of having to be complainants to initiate enforcement puts us into conflict with our neighbors, which is not a situation I generally want to be in with my neighbors, whether they be students or not. Thanks for listening. I wasn't quite as short as I wanted, but that's what I got to say.
All right, thank you, Mr. Awadi. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this point? This is where the public has an opportunity to comment on this application.
I don't see any additional attendees wishing to speak.
All right. So now we have the opportunity for the applicant to respond to any of the public comments if they so choose.
Yes, it was actually kind of a delightful set of comments from the public as far as these things go. So appreciate the consideration offered. I think mostly, I mean, obviously there's been a discussion that there's been a change in demographics in Amherst between 1981 and today. You know, we've had several decades go by, so you know, more and more we all know that students are sucking up pretty much every nook and cranny they can get their beds into in town. So that's an operating environment, and not much that can be controlled. I don't know a single landlord or property manager who would rather rent to students over a family. So, you know, the most desirable tenants will be taken given that opportunity. I'm sure of it. And a couple other things. Like I said, I am certain that the property manager and owner are amenable to other configurations. If we can stack vehicles, if we can put more vehicles in the front setback zone, more than the two normally allowed, we can reduce the amount of pavement, we can reduce the physical opportunity for more cars to jam themselves on that hypothetical 19 spaces. I looked at. A little bit hyperbole in that. However, it's true. If you can drive a car, you can park it and get out of there. So if there are fewer places that vehicles can physically occupy on the property, more controls to make sure that they can't go into the yard and get around this or that. I'm sure that the owners would be amenable to that. So if stacking and more cars in the front setback are permissible, we can absolutely decrease the general impact as well as draw vehicles farther away from Mr. Awadi's bedroom. We're not intending to cause nuisance, but the bylaw encourages vehicles to be pushed that far onto the property. So that's where we are. We get relief from that, we'll come back with a different configuration happily, but I'd love to get some feedback from the board if we think that's possible.
All right, any comments from board members? I have one. It was interesting to learn that the one half of the house doesn't have any cars presently, but it seemed that there was 4 or 5 cars parked there when I went past it today. And I also noticed that there were 4 cars parked there today. There were 2 of them that were parked up against the house, both more than half off the parking area, leaving room for 2 cars to park in front of the garage. So you could have easily have had 4 cars parked right up against the house. And there was a 3rd car, or another car that was parked off, pointing at an angle, one on the street. So right now, it seems that there is a possibility of just running cars straight across from the door to the door. You could move it back a little bit to give people access to it, but right now it seems that that's what they're doing currently. And I also do think that it does speak to the availability of public transportation, that there is, at least presently, evidently there's 4 tenants that do not have a car currently. Are there other comments or go ahead, Mr. Henry.
May I ask a quick question? Yep. So when the one side has no cars, is it designated parking for each side, or is it first come first serve kind of a parking situation?
I believe it is a free for all kind of first come first serve. And again, if the owner corrects me, I'm happy to stand corrected. They're not designated spaces, and I think particularly when you do have a stacked parking situation, which has been the case for a long time, you can't really designate spaces, because then you can't coordinate people's schedules with their parking space. If one person's blocked in, they gotta move when they gotta move, and so there are designated locations. We could designate locations if there are no vehicles that are parked in, but I think that's the only circumstance where that's viable.
And perhaps I missed this, and apologies if it was already covered. Does the lease speak to parking and the rights to park?
I'm sure that it does, and I have to admit, I am not the authority on the details of lease and the parking. And Joe, please, if you have a better answer than my saying I don't know, I'd love to hear it.
Yes, I'm not the best person either. It would be the property manager. Unfortunately, they're not on the call, but I do know from seeing the leases over the years that they are specified. There are parking amendments to the lease. Yes.
So I understand that you guys are asking for more time. So if we're going to continue this, I would ask that we see a copy of the lease and the parking language.
Yes, that was submitted with the original submittal. However, the leases are several pages of course, mostly, fine print, but it does, I'm scanning through it right now to see if I have an answer, but
registration is section 8.1 through 8.4. 8.3, dealing with registration, registered with the landlord, parking, and unauthorized parking, which doesn't really comport with the management plan, the parking plan, or the management plan that you guys had submitted. So I guess a couple of things before we go any further. I think that I got a number of questions. I'm not ready to make a decision on this tonight for a whole host of reasons. Number one, because there's more to hear from on the COMCOM and what's happening there. Two, I think you ought to be looking at a plan that incorporates the garage and takes fewer cars on the property, even if it is stacking. Number three, I'm not sure that you need to have eight spots, and you could look at some alternatives for less spaces, total spaces. You could do 2 in the garage and 4 on the property. Those 4 could be lined up directly against the house, and they wouldn't necessarily have lead trespass on either of the neighbors. But that's something that, Mr. Sparkle, you're much more able to take a look at than I am. Just my gut feeling here. I think you can look at some opportunities. I think, as I said, I think you need a parking plan, and you don't really have one. That is, how do you manage this? If you're going to have people right now, people are parking on grass there. You can see from the tire treads, and I saw it today. So you're going to need to have some kind of a parking plan, and that could be a benefit to not only you as a landlord, and you could enforce it, but it would also be a benefit to the neighbors.
Mr. Chair,
yeah.
Mr. Meadows has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just finishing my sentence. I will let Mr. Meadows speak now. Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Meadows.
I would agree with a lot of things that you just indicated. And one thing that Mr. Sparkle has said that I believe in, and that is that there is a great demand for housing for students in this town now. And based upon that, I am sure that they could get enough students to live in that house without cars, that they would have no problem in renting to them. So the only way I would vote for this, if it was for 4 cars, and I would prefer to see 2 in the garage and 2 in the parking lot, and fencing to keep them off of the lawn, along the street, and along the side of the driveway. Other than that, I can't imagine voting for this. Just to make sure that Mr. Sparkle is aware.
Thank you for your perspective.
Mr. Sloviter.
I just want to clarify, are we going to go to, wait a minute, a public meeting if we don't vote on it tonight, or is now the opportunity to express concerns?
I think it's a good time to express concerns. I'm not sure that we need the formality of the public meeting, because I'm pretty confident we want to continue this, Mr. Sloviter. So
okay.
I think there's a lot of discretion to give your views right now.
Okay. In that case, may I be recognized?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a number of concerns and find myself very much of the same mindset as Mr. Meadows. I thought Mr. Arwady was a remarkably credible witness, I suppose. And his point about the parking area that would be along his property line being an attractive nuisance really resonated with me. It's right at the property line, no setback at all, even though it's not a building. And cars coming in and out at 1 or 2 in the morning is automatically annoying. I felt that his point about enforcement was extremely relevant. And I also drove down the street today. I did not encounter Chair Judge when I drove there, so we did not collectively increase the traffic flow at the same time and run into a problem. But when I was there, there were 5 cars there, which it's remarkable that one side has no cars. So that means the 5 cars were all from either the other side or a visitor somewhere, or one of the 4 people who has a car also has a second car. I don't know, but it means that they get visitors and that there is some amount of traffic. I also have a bit of a problem with changing the rules just because the circumstances have changed and more students have cars. I think that Mr. Meadows was absolutely correct. If one side of this building has no cars, that means that those 4 occupants have figured out how to get to class without a vehicle. And that might indicate that 4 spaces divided between 2 units would be adequate. And those are the rules. And if things have changed, I don't know that it is the responsibility of the town to amend the rules to accommodate a property where there are so many other concerns associated with it. So I also would have a very difficult, if not impossible, time voting for the proposal as submitted. I think it needs to be 4 cars, or at the very least, address it by permitting stacking so that you are not changing the property so much and increasing the opportunity for so much parking. Whether it's hyperbole to say it was 19 or it's 17 or 16, I don't really care. And you, Mr. Sparkle, acknowledged yourself, if you can drive on a surface, you can stop your car and get out of it. So that much area on which cars can drive is, to me, a formula for some increased number of cars being there. So I have a lot of concerns about this, and you know, I think that needs to be addressed. So thank you for listening.
Mr. Smith, you have been really patiently, it looks like you've been standing the whole time, which I find remarkable. You deal with parking enforcement, I think, for the town. One of the questions that I have for you is, was there a parking plan in place that was not followed, or how did we get to the enforcement action that you guys took? Oops, we can't hear you. No, we don't hear you. It's not
Muted.
He's not muted, no. Can you hear us? Obviously he can, yeah. So it's something in your microphone.
As my better half says all the time, hold please.
Yeah.
Going old school. Yeah.
All right, can you hear me now?
Oh, we sure can.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Loud and clear. That's all right.
There was a pair of earpods plugged in on one side, and I had a USB port with my headset in it, so I could hear you, but obviously. So here I am.
Great.
This came to our attention based on complaints about excessive parking. The parking plan on file, I think, showed 5 spots and had been sort of carried over from an earlier time. And what I was able to observe, it was about a year ago, was that the split rail post fence that delineated the front of the property and the driveway was in place on the left, but on the right had not been maintained. And in addition, there's a tree. And if you go back to the first picture that Mr. Sparkle showed us, you can see the tree on the right behind the post and rail fence. And that was gone at that time. The muddy ruts that you see today go right over where that tree trunk was removed. And the parking had just expressed itself even wider at that point. So there were, if memory serves, 4 rows of cars, potentially with 2 each. Oftentimes somebody pulled up on the street. So, one basic option is to just go back and maintain it the way that it once was. It once had, it was laid out for 5 cars, but, de facto you had 3 stacked pairs of cars and nothing in the garage. I'm thrilled that this is being addressed. The process, that I refer people to in an enforcement letter is, wending its way. And I am complaint driven, my workload, there's way too much for me to do. And I do end up prioritizing complaints, because I have to. There are times of the year when I am not looking for work because there's too much to do. So what I'm saying is a good parking plan is a big help to me, because it's clear either someone is compliant or not. In this case, at least maintenance has to be done to the original plan, but that doesn't give you 8 cars. There was this discrepancy, which we'll own. We accepted a management plan that said eight cars and a parking plan that said 5. So that was, inevitably going to lead to challenges.
Okay.
And
Mr. Smith, I didn't have you identify yourself, but you work for the town as an enforcement officer, correct?
Yeah, I'm a certified housing inspector as a health officer. I'm a local inspector as a building inspector, and I serve in the role of lead code enforcement officer.
Thank you. And Ms. Williams, can we get a copy of the old parking plan?
I can find it and send it
It would
to
be
you,
good to
yes.
have, just in our packets for the next meeting.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. I guess that's one of the reasons that I said it'd be good to have a parking plan in your management plan, because evidently over time that plan wasn't followed, and that's what caused the enforcement action. So a plan to provide for to ensure that the parking plan that is eventually adopted is complied with would be good, whether that's stickers or hangers or whatever way you're going to do that. Mr. Henry, it looks like you were going to ask something.
That's okay, Mr. Clerk. I am of Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
So if I heard you correctly, the original parking plan, was it 5 on one side or 5 on each side?
It was 5 spots for the 2 units.
As a whole? For the whole the whole building?
Yeah, 3 directly in front of the house and stacks of 2 on the left and the right. So the paved central parking area that you see today, plus the muddy expansion to the right, just in that paved area, 1, 2, 3 cars directly in front of the 2 garage spaces. The outer edges had a second car in them. Those would be the 2 in the front setback.
And that was originally filed and approved parking plan?
Yes, that's the one that we have on file.
Okay. And you also mentioned that there was a fence that, for lack of a better term, helped maintain that parking plan, but it was not maintained by the property owner.
Yeah, it survives on the left. It's missing on the right. And on the left, the parking stays on the improved surface, on the hardened surface. And on the right, parking has expanded into the lawn area, the unimproved area.
And would you suggest that if the fence were to be, say, reestablished, that would help with this parking issue that we're dealing with?
That would help, but it also would be good to recognize that 8 cars can't be associated with the house with, you know, a lack of parking on the street and the limited parking available, you know, currently on the house. I'm talking about current conditions. You know, I too am open to whichever direction you all take in changing or, you know, continuing the parking. Whatever you come up with is what I would enforce in the future. So the easier and more realistic it is that with respect to all, and I, you know, I hear the comments about it's a reality that many students bring cars to school. And, you know, I similarly impressed with the current behavior that one side works without cars, basically, although I'm sure they have friends with cars that come and see them. And the other side has, you know, fills the parking area.
So one final question. So I wasn't able to go to the site visit, but as the expert who enforces parking, reasonably, how many parking spaces do you think this could reasonably accommodate? I know the permit initially said 5, but how many could it reasonably accommodate and still essentially not create issues for abutters?
You mean with the current size of the hardened area?
Yes.
Well, if you allowed another car in the setback, you could have 3 stacked rows. I don't know, you know, that's not my decision to say that that's desirable or not. That's a lot of juggling for people to get in and out. Yet, as has been pointed out, some people successfully do that. That makes the garage spaces, if they were to be considered, probably unmanageable, unless somebody just wants a place to park a car and leave it for the semester. There would be 3 cars in a row, essentially, and just the puzzle of trying to get somebody in and out that's I would expect would be difficult, too difficult.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good use for AI, I think, in the future. Or Tetris, one or the other, you know?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I think Mr. Sparkle and Mr. Ballanty, I think we've given you some directions, some indication of what we're thinking about, the thoughts of the board. We haven't taken a vote yet, but there's clearly some desire to reduce the sort of visual clutter, to reduce the parking, the ability for people to park kind of haphazardly on the property, and to reduce the enticement to park outside. I also think you've also heard that there's some indication that 4 is a number that people are comfortable with. 5 was a number that was originally applied to this property. So I think, and you have to work with the Concom as well. So I think you've got some indications from us where we're likely to go, and I hope that's helpful for you.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of valuable information shared here this evening. I know there were a lot of options in how we would approach this, and sometimes I show up and it's a no-brainer. There's a clear best way to go forward. There are options. We're going to be taking a look at them. I'll be discussing with the property owner and the management company. And we absolutely request that this meeting be continued to a date certain. Ideally after the Concom meeting. I don't have a schedule for that, so probably February would be the earliest. Or I'm not sure if there's a way to continue without a date certain or a condition that something else occurs.
Well, we can figure out how we do that here in a second, but I think that's clearly the desire of the members of the board is to continue it. Mr. White, I see that your hand is raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as far as my comments, I'm probably going to reserve them until after we hear back from the COMCOM. All I would be doing is repeating so much of what the other members of the board have already said. So I'm not going to waste everybody's time, but I just wanted to let the board know kind of where I'm at right now. But thank you.
All right. Okey doke. So, Ms. Williams, we don't have a date set for February and March yet for next year, I don't think. But we can pretty much assume that the second and the fourth Thursdays are when we tend to meet. And can we look at the second Thursday of, I think the second Thursday of March is about as soon as we could take this matter up again. And Mr. Sparkle, I suspect it's going to take you some time working with CONCOM, because I really would like to know what CONCOM thinks before we try to take a stab at this, you know? So I think that's going to, I found it, they've got a lot of work. They've got a lot to do. And I think it's probably March before we can do it. And the 2nd of March, second Thursday in March is the 13th. And that would typically be our meeting date, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So I would entertain a motion that we continue this public hearing on ZBA FY 2025-09, 6365 Salem Road until March 13th at 6 p.m. Do I have such a motion?
So
moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, the vote occurs on the motion. The chair votes aye. Mr. Slobiter?
Aye.
Mr. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
And Mr. White?
Aye.
All right. Well, good luck, gentlemen. We'll see you in March. Probably, I suspect we'll see you, Mr. Sparkle, before that with some other matter, but we'll see you guys all in March. And if you have questions, work with the staff. They can really be helpful and can seek opinions and guidance from us individually.
Happy to.
The board.
Thank you very much. I hope you have a good holiday season to everyone.
You too.
Thank you for your time and consideration. Best wishes.
The next order of business is public comment on any matter not before the board tonight. So any member of the public who wishes to speak on anything except those things that were before us.
Got 422.
What happened?
Oh my
to Mr.
goodness. Yes, you're right. You're right. Thank
Mr.
you.
Reedy.
Yes,
We
Mr.
missed-
Reedy.
We
had one
missed
of the-
Mr. Reedy.
Well, because I knew we weren't going to take it up, I just skipped along. It is not the next order of business, public comment. The next order of business is a motion to withdraw without prejudice ZBA FY 2025-12, 422 Amity Street. The applicant has submitted a letter asking us to withdraw that without prejudice. It seems to me that is a fine request. Is there any comment from members of the board? Mr. Reedy, you don't need to even say anything, I don't think, do you? Or
Just
do you
maybe a
feel-
preview of.
Do you wish to? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, just maybe a preview of coming attractions. So yeah, what we had asked for was a modification to the variance to increase the height to 6 stories. You had approved the variance earlier this year for 2 5-story buildings and a modification to the lot area. So we got Barry got numbers to actually build those buildings, and the steel was like $10 million, and there's no way to build those buildings that make economic sense. So we didn't want to waste your time, and so I'm going to be very brief because I don't want to waste your time now. We didn't want to waste your time asking for something that we didn't think we could build. So that's the request, but we're probably going to change it. I talked to Rob Mora today and Nate Malloy that it looks like we may be changing the plan to eliminate the 2 buildings and just do 1 building instead. So I suspect at some point, maybe January, February, once we have the plans done over the next couple of weeks, we'll be submitting for an amendment because the variance you gave said on the plans that we had approved. So we just have to come back in. It's going from like 85 units to 77 units. It still has commercial space on the first floor, etc. But just we'll be back. So the request today is for withdrawal without prejudice to allow us to come back for a modification in the future.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? If not, I would entertain a motion that we permit the withdrawal without prejudice of ZBA FY 2025-12, 422 Amity Street. Is there
So moved.
a second?
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, the vote occurs on the motion. Chair votes aye. Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Sloviter?
Aye.
There you go. Sorry that I almost forgot you. I bet that gave you a
Okay.
heart attack there.
Thanks a lot. Happy holidays. See you next year.
See you next year. Happy holidays. All right, now, the next order of business is public comment on any matter not before the board tonight. Anybody from the public who wishes to speak, so indicate by raising your hand or pressing *9. And we have nobody that wants to speak.
Everyone's
Next.
dropped off. Well, not everyone, but no one who is here is wishing to speak.
Nobody's wishing to speak. Yep.
Yes.
All right. Lastly is new business. And Ms. Williams, can you go through the schedule with us? That would be
Sure.
most
I don't
important.
have
new
my
business.
normally printed schedule. I can pull it up though, and we can work on it together. One moment. When was the last time we updated this? The 4th. Okay.
So, I mean, I think that the key point is that next week we were going to have wayfinders on the 19th, but it doesn't make sense to have wayfinders on the 19th next week. They need to get more information to answer some of the questions we have, and so it would not be productive to have wayfinders on the 19th. So that is going to be, at this point in time, we have nothing scheduled for the 19th. It's a surprise Christmas present for all of us, or holiday present for all of us, that we don't have to meet on the 19th.
Okay.
What does that mean, that there will be no meeting, or do we keep it open in case something comes up?
I think it's too late for something to come up if it hasn't already been.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
we still have to vote, right? We have to vote
Yeah,
to
we have-
continue.
Yeah, we just have to, but that's right. We do have to vote to continue the meeting. So I'll have to be there. And everybody else is welcome to attend, but it's just a quick motion to continue, right?
Take like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We can't do it now?
No, we have to, because there's a meeting already noticed for the 19th. We're just going to say that we're just going to continue the 19th to another point, to another date.
Okay.
So we do have a meeting on the 19th.
Yes, we do.
Just
Please show
we-
up.
You know, just for the point of continuing it.
Just
In
to
the
stop by and say hello to each other. It won't be long.
Yeah, and in the past, sometimes it's just been done by voice vote too. So, but I would welcome all of you to be there, if you wish.
We will, Captain.
All right.
No, I won't.
And what's
Who isn't?
after that?
So after that, once we continue to the 9th, it will be a full wayfinders meeting for the 9th, and if they need it, the 16th as well. And then we come back on the 23rd for a regular ZBA meeting with just regular town stuff.
I have a note that the 23rd is solar. Is that not the case?
It is also solar, so there are a few
Oh.
things. It's going to be Shutesbury Road. It's going to be 85 North Whitney, as I type these in. And I think there's one more, can't remember what it is right now, but there is, I think, a third that's going to be on the agenda. So on the 23rd for Shutesbury, you can anticipate, and we'll talk more about this. Steve, town staff, will brief you on this, but basically we are planning on having WSP, the third party reviewer, present their findings on the 23rd. So that's going to be a really important one. We do know that Concom has asked the applicant to do a redesign specifically because of the access road that they proposed. Concom has, I guess, decided it doesn't work or they need more information, specifically because it's going between two vernal pools. And they need them to do a study on those vernal pools, which they can't do right now because we are in a severe drought and can't really look at vernal pools until spring. So that entire process is sort of on hold, if you will. But they do have 60 days to present Concom with some alternative analysis and some alternative plans. So I believe they're going back before Concom sometime in January. And we just want to be able to give the ZBA, the applicant, and, the town some information as to what WSP has done so far as regards to findings based on what was previously or currently proposed. But we know the plans will change, so that will more than likely mean we need to do another review of these new plans when they come through. So that will be what's happening with Shutesbury. So I anticipate that will be an important meeting for everybody. Let's see.
I think, Ms. Williams, I told you I may have a conflict with one of the hearings for the 23rd. So I am on Shrewsbury, so I'll be there for that, but you may need a backup for one of the other ones. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. Thank you for reminding me.
And I just would say, make sure that you let us know if there are changes on the wayfinders. I think 4 of the 5 members have missed one meeting. So if you can't make one of the wayfinders meetings, please let us know ahead of time so we can reschedule. It'd be my preference to have a full panel if we can. It only needs 3 votes to pass. It doesn't need 4. But to the extent that we can have a full panel, complete work on the wayfinders on the 19th, the 9th and the 16th, and probably the first week in February, that would be great. Just let us know.
I'm looking up that date right now.
All right.
Is that the 6th? I don't know if we will need the 13th. I will double check where I've put everybody, but if we need to move people around, the 13th of February is also, I guess, an option, but we'll see.
We may want to look at the 6th because we only have until right? Are we done in February or done in March?
We have to be done in February.
Yeah, end of February. So we want to be front end load February activities if we need to. Okay.
And given the importance, just for full disclosure, I'm not available the entire week of February 16, just in case.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. All right. Any other questions on the schedule or on any matter at all? Okay. Well, I hope to see all of you on the next Thursday to quickly continue the meeting on wayfinders and wish each other a happy holidays. If I don't see you and you don't show up, that'll be okay because I still wish you a happy. All right.
I'll trade you my meeting that I have that time for your meeting.
I don't think I want to do that deal. How's that?
Yeah, I don't think you want to either.
I don't think I want to do that deal. All right. If there are no other questions, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. This is not a debatable motion, so the vote occurs. Chair votes aye. Mr. Meadows?
Aye.
Mr. Sloter?
Aye.
Mr. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
All right, motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned. Happy holidays, everybody.
Same to you guys. Travel safe.
Happy. Good night.